This is a huge phenomenon in the last, I don't know, several years in web design, is having some kind of pattern library or style guide for the website that you're building, so much to the point of like, there's people like, it's a huge part of their process. Like it could be the deliverable itself. Like you get Orvis or whatever, and your deliverable to Orvis is not a complete website. It is a design pattern for the website. We'll design you the components, cards and tabs and a search thing and whatever. That's what we're building for you. You piece it together. Like that, it can be as extreme as that. And if you do a good job with that, it can be really cool. It can be really empowering. It can be, I can build this website really fast because I have every component I could possibly need. And I literally can just piece them together in really simple templates to build a site. And I think it's worth mentioning as part of all that new JavaScript stuff, because those modules and stuff that you're making can be design patterns. You think of them as tabs and a card and a search form and a login form and this stuff, but they manifest then as like React components or whatever. And then it goes into a step further than that, in that you can even like isolate the CSS to a component. And I think that's like, if we're talking about the future of building front-end websites, I think stuff like CSS modules is a part of that. Like, okay, we have this big new client and we need to build a really solid website, and we just know it's going to be complicated. It's going to be big and weird and things could get out of control on us, whatever. Let's just pare it down. Let's start with design. Let's design componentry that's built to be pieced together. Then let's build those components as literal JavaScript components. Then maybe we'll approach the CSS for it, and so that the CSS is like isolated to those components. So if it turns out they don't need one of those components, everything goes with it. The component JavaScript is gone, the CSS that's related to that component is gone, all the like click handlers and DOM management stuff is gone, that they're just these little balls of usefulness that get pieced together into a website. And like even CSS, that makes me very uncomfortable too, but just because I'm just so comfortable just writing, this is how I write CSS. Oh, something needs to be styled. Oh, that looks like a search form. I'm going to call it class equals search form, and I'm going to style it. I've done that forever. I'll do that tomorrow probably. I like writing CSS like that. But I think that probably is going to slowly go away as websites get more and more complicated, which happens every day. It's going to be like, you know what? This is a big website. At a minimum, I'm going to do like BEM. People heard of BEM? BEM is like you give it a name, but then like every child element of it is like name-spaced with that name. So you can call this search form if you want, fine, but there's an input inside of it that in the DOM is a child element of that. So it's got to be search, it's going to have a class name of search form underscore underscore input. And this label is search form underscore underscore label. Oh, there's a variation. This happens to be the dark one because it's in the dark header. That's going to be search form dash dash dark underscore underscore input or whatever. It's like just a naming convention. It's pretty simple, but it's very prescriptive. And that way it's like you're not getting into this CSS thing of like lots of nested you can just look at a chunk of CSS and be like, I get it, all that CSS is super related to each other, and it's not, none of it is any more specific than anything else on the page, so you're not like having specificity battles and stuff. That's like the bare minimum you could do, I would think. And then stuff like CSS modules, and there's plenty of competitors to this idea, take it a step further, and it's kind of like bizarre. It's like, no, it doesn't necessarily need to be like JSX like this. There's lots of ways to do it, but you like import your style sheet like you would an ESX6 kind of include style, and then apply the styles to it kind of inline like that. And it allows you to write normal kind of looking CSS, but both in the CSS and in the HTML, it makes these super bizarre looking class names, which you'd be like, why would I ever do that? It seems not reusable. It's like, that's kind of the point, is that it's not reusable. It's like, it's this chunk of CSS that's only ever useful for this one thing that it's applied to. It makes me feel uncomfortable, but also kind of feels like the future. And that that this will never conflict with anything else ever on the page, and I can just throw it away if I need to and not worry that I've deleted a style that's necessary for logged in users from France who have 5 or more things in their cart and whatever. Like, I've talked to plenty of companies who have trouble with that. They have this style sheet that's been around for a while that nobody will delete anything from. They call it an append-only style sheet. Nobody will touch it in that way. I even talked to a big company once who charted it over like 8 years. They had a CSS file that looked, it just only grew ever. There was no moment ever in which you got no, they never deleted a selector ever. Which is like, it's not even the size of it, because maybe it's only like 50K of CSS or something. It's not the worst performance thing in the world. But what it says is, all y'all afraid of that thing. And this kind of thing says nobody has to be afraid anymore. This selector has a specific job, and that's its job, and it will only ever do that job. Which is kind of cool. And there's lots of different ways to approach that kind of thing. I mean, there's all kinds of extreme ways of like avoiding this. Have you seen tachyons? Oh, I can't even spell it on a good day. So this is so bizarre to me and against everything that normally front-end developers charge for, but it's like, let's see, features maybe? It's worth looking at because it's so bizarre. It's like something like 10,000, I'm not finding exactly the reference I want to, but it's like 10,000 or so classes that only have one job, that are like, it's a class name that only sets like a color of text. It's a class name that only sets a font size. It's a class name that only sets float left. It's a class name that only sets width 33% or something like that. And so the idea is, if you use it, you ship it, and you don't write any other CSS ever. Because it theoretically has everything that CSS has to offer, you only ever write class names and none of your own other CSS ever. If you did that, imagine that 8-year graph of CSS. It's just flat, because nobody's afraid of it, because it's always the same. You never add anything or remove anything, because it's always there, and it will just be the same forever. It might be gross. I don't know that that's going to shake out for you, if that'll be comfortable with everybody forever, but it does solve that like fear problem and that append-only problem. So if that's your big problem, something like tachyons might make sense. Just maybe.